Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on June 12, 2021 at approximately 12:28 p.m. PST. Today is, to say the least, a little hectic. I tried recording this about a half an hour ago, but it kept coming up so choppy. I kept getting distracted by other things going on that I deleted the whole thing and started over. So here we are. Again, this is a live recording, meaning I edit nothing. If I have a problem with it, I only run them half an hour. So if I have a problem recording them, what I end up doing is deleting the whole thing and starting over. Now, the thing that has thrown my life into a real spin right now is memories. In this case, childhood memories that have come to the surface and have clarified things that I frankly misremembered parts of. Some pretty drastic changes had to be adjusted for. Net result, I've ended up having to really try and get my head focused just to deal with it. But many of you have had the same problem where you've had your day's been going one way and all of a sudden either an event or a memory comes up that just throws you for a complete loop. It doesn't matter if you live on the street, if you're a millionaire, if you're heterosexual, gay, whatever religion, you're all essentially the same. Okay, 90 to 95% of the people, I am firmly convinced, are decent people trying to do a decent job with their life, trying to get along with people. But society, the way it has been permitted to devolve, has created some rather serious problems. Which is why I come back to this issue of it is time for everybody, whether you're listening to this message directly from me or passing it on to other people. This message I've returned to set this message to the entire world that it is time to realize that working together, we can eliminate war, famine, greed. Fear is going to be there. It's part of nature. Okay. Fear is sort of one of those things that sort of helps keep things in order. Okay, you've got to have the good and the bad in order to have a choice. Okay, now where it comes to the spiritual guide side of things, I only talk about 3 laws. Compare whatever following you're doing, whatever program you're following, whatever religion, guidelines, support group, doesn't matter. Look at the guidelines that they give you and check and see if they fit in these 3 laws. Be true to yourself, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you, energy out, energy in. Okay, now if you find one that does not fit securely in one of those 3, absolutely drop me a line at one of the contact points below this video, because I would love to hear about it. I've looked into a lot of different venues, into multiple religions, multiple support groups like AA, NA, psychologists around the world, okay, and found, so far, I've never found a philosophy that doesn't fit in those 3. Okay, now, that being said, my memories of my childhood, well, I've always told people that my childhood is more like science fiction than anything else. Actually, never mind my childhood, my whole life. Okay, but every tool that I offer is a tool that I personally am putting to use, which is where this funny little sign here that I've got right handy right about now. Yeah, put it upside down. This one. Okay, I've got one just like it, except it's done on cardstock and laminated that sits on my fridge. And if you haven't got one there already, I strongly encourage you to put it there. I am worth it. These 4 words are the 4 most powerful words that I've come across this lifetime for self-esteem, self-worth, to just keep them in order. Okay, and let's face it, if you're looking in the mirror and going, oh, I'm absolutely worth nothing, then you're going to have trouble trying to put forth that idea. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean you can't do it. Okay, I've mentioned before, I have my own issues I deal with. I'm by no means perfect, but perhaps it's a question of having been through a lot of it that I'm able to relate to a lot of what you personally are going through. The one thing two things I've managed to successfully avoid for my entire life is this lifetime. I've never spent time in jail. Heck, I've never even managed to get a speeding ticket. Okay, and it's not a question of getting a speeding ticket is a great thing to get, but it is a great thing to avoid. Okay, and I've never ended up with myself living on the street. Okay, or living after I moved out of my home. When I moved out of the home at 18, I think it was 18. Since then, I've never lived in a home that I was not paying rent to. Okay, spent a lot of time at some that I wasn't paying rent to, but I was paying rent elsewhere. Okay, so do I relate to this? The answer is yes. I grew and see when I was a young adult, I connected with a group of people that we used to call the place that we hung out the Hobbit Hole. Okay, all of us had different backgrounds. Many of the people that I hung out with had criminal records or had run-ins with the law one way or the other. Came from fringe elements of society, but we all supported each other across the board. Okay, it was a mutually beneficial arrangement where we looked out for each other regardless of our past, or for that matter, regardless of our present. This is the kind of world that I came to understand when I was a young adult. It was just a little pocket, just one little house. But that little house helped me cope with a lot of things. Okay, and provided the backbone for a lot of the stories I'm writing. Like the novel series I'm writing, that little house that we referred to as the Hobbit Hole was absolutely the best little home after I left my birth house. Okay, that little place we called the Hobbit Hole had more of a sense of family than just about anything I'd ever seen. Okay, and like I said, we all came from different walks of life. Now, the reality of it is this: blood is thicker than water. That saying is very true, literally and figuratively. But the reality is, when we're talking about family, the bloodline family is not always the one that works. Okay, sometimes bloodline family is one of these things that ends up getting lost in the wayside for whatever reason. And then you go with the family that you choose. Now, the one caution about a family, if you're choosing it, is make sure they are following two things. One, karmic law is absolutely important, is imperative in my eyes. If you're hooking in with what claim to be a religious or spiritual group, number one, make sure they are promoting love and cooperation, not fear and war. Okay, if you're hooking in with somebody that is saying, come to this wonderful little retreat, it's all fenced in, we've got armed guards around it, and you can give us all your money. Because according to many of these, it's like, well, money and materialism is evil. Well, no, it's not. Okay, I don't know about you. I don't have a lot of, I don't put a lot of weight on material stuff. But I certainly like having a roof over my head, and I like having food in my house. This is just one of those things I'm very content with. Okay, evil is not a possession. Evil is based on action. If you're doing things to deliberately hurt people, to deliberately damage property, like if you're one of these people that is going out and you're seeing people defacing ancient artifacts, okay, ancient statues, we'll pull them down because we don't like what they represent. Well, whether you like what they represent or not doesn't really matter. The events happened as far as that person, whoever built that statue, that's the way they saw it. And today, like for instance, if we look at the Civil War, the Civil War in the United States, or the War of Independence, or any of those, whatever was going on there, or the wars that took place over in the Middle East, unless you're a whole pile older than I figure, you probably weren't at the Civil War yourself. You probably weren't there when Exodus occurred, like when the Jews left Egypt. You probably weren't there. I'm betting most of you weren't. Now, if you're like me, Okay, and the odds of that are pretty limited. You may have past life memories that date back that far. For instance, I do remember quite well, and I don't mean I read about it because I'm a lousy researcher. I read terribly slowly. So I rely on memory. Okay. But I remember Exodus. I remember leaving Egypt. I remember crossing the Red Sea. I remember things like the Great Flood, Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. I remember the fall of Rome. Okay. Or more to the point, I remember the gladiatorial uprising. Okay. I remember Pompeii and Manoa both. Like, these are just some of the past lives I remember. Quite frankly, and many of these I've had corroboration from either gifted seers or other people that have remembered the same thing, the same events. Okay, whether you believe in past life memories or not doesn't really matter. What does matter is whether you accept the fact that if somebody's telling you these things, that it is possible that they're being accurate, especially if there is corroborating evidence to back it up. Now, I'm not here to convince anybody about my memories. Okay, I have enough trouble dealing with my own. But the memories from my childhood that are coming to the surface now are causing massive complications in realigning the way I'm looking at things. Okay, because I'm having to deal with what I thought were fun and games and turned out to be a much worse situation. Okay. Now, do understand, something I do want to make absolutely crystal clear. My childhood was not abusive as such. Okay, as far as my family went, it was a normal, quite frankly, loving family in my eyes. You know, mom and dad were block parents. We always had people around. Dad was always out there helping people, and mom always had an open door. Okay, so, and of course, with the number of kids we had in the family, yes, we had our conflicts. Every family does. But none of us ended up with jail records, as far as I'm aware. Okay, and only one of us ended up dead, and he ended up dead about 10 years ago because of illness. Not because of something he did, just because of something he was born with. So, when I'm talking about memories of childhood, I'm talking about things that happened that were not because of a really bad situation for my family. That's still something. I mean, I've got my glitches there, much like you probably have. And as I've done with many of my family, I really encourage you to reach out to those that you've been estranged from, whether you feel you caused it or you feel they did. Okay, since I'm talking to you, I'll drop it in your lap to reach out and see if you can work together to put the negative past behind you. Because hanging on to the negative past is not going to alter the fact it occurred. Okay, you can paint any picture you want, but the event itself will still sit there. For the longest time, well, in all fairness, until about 3 days ago, my memories of the accident that tore my leg apart, okay, that gave me the bad leg, were memories of an enjoyable. It was a, oh look, we're having fun, we're racing, and we just had an unfortunate accident. As it turned out, that is not entirely the way it went down. Now, can I corroborate it with anybody, like from a conscious standpoint? Not a prayer. Because the only two people that were witness to it, well, technically there were four. Okay, I have no idea who the other two people were. One was a gas attendant. One was working on the bottom of a car, and then there was my mom and dad, and one other chap. So I guess there were five. Okay, I know who the other chap is, but I have no idea how to get a hold of him. It's been 50 years, almost 50 years since I've seen him. So all I've got is the memories and the side effects of what those memories have done. Okay, so I'm going to have to deal with that. And it's causing its own complications, which I will be working on today in rather strong detail. But in the meantime, I'll tell you the same thing that I just told myself. I cannot change the fact it happened, And all of the things you've gone through, everything you've experienced, good, bad, positive, negative, doesn't matter. Everything you've gone through has led you to be the person you are right now. You cannot alter how you got to where you are, but you can decide how you're going to behave from here on out. What are you going to focus on? Recommendation: focus on the positive. Minimize the negative, maximize the positive, and move forward as best you can. And above all else, forgive yourself for anything that you feel you may have done or that you know you have done. Okay. Like, I mean, I had one memory that came up that showed me doing something that I was absolutely appalled by. Okay, and it was, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the fact of the matter is, the memory I had was this memory of, I did this, and I shouldn't have. Well, the clarification on the memory brought back why I did what I did, which doesn't make it right, but it sure explained it. Because I had a real negative reaction, but as it turned out, the reason I had the negative reaction was because of what I could sense coming. Okay, and this is why the fact that I sense things before they come, many people call it, many people have said, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist or you're paranoid. Okay, prime example, and I mentioned this before. When I told people back in the 70s that the Canadian government knew exactly how much money you were carrying, okay, if you walked into a government building, they could tell you not only how much money you were carrying, but how much of each denomination. I was told I was just paranoid. The government wasn't doing that. They didn't have the ability. That was in the 70s. 30 years later, in the early 2000s, either W5 or 60 Minutes, which were news programs at the time, came out with an episode that detailed how they had been tracking the exact amount of money people were carrying back in the 70s. They were doing it with a funny little microchip put into the money. Okay, now I don't understand the entire technical side of it. I only know that I saw it happening. Okay, I told people about it. I was told I was being paranoid, and 30 years later, I got proven that I hadn't been paranoid. I was just seeing things before the general populace. So when I look at things like what's going on right now, COVID's sitting the way it is. Okay, it has played absolute havoc for the last year and a half. Okay, and I mean we're pushing. Well, quite frankly, we're pushing 2 years now. People keep saying, I want I want things to go back to the way they were. Well, scrap the idea. I certainly don't want them to go back. Greed, debauchery, theft, anger, violence, okay, prejudice, abuse. I just don't desire any of that stuff to be back. Although I would have to be naive to think that it's all going to go away right away. But I will tell you that if we focus on getting along, on making the appropriate changes to make things work a little bit more effectively, a little bit more on the idea of do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. When we all choose to do the same thing, this world will be a whole lot better. We won't have that kind of conflict. Okay, now, the reality of it is, people keep saying, when's World War III starting? Well, World War III already started, just people weren't told. Okay, World War III is not about people shooting people. It is about Mother Nature saying, hey, you're so negative, I'm done with it. Here's an earthquake to occupy you. Here's a flood to occupy you. Let's try a tornado that's of a staggering level, just to keep your mind off the fact that you guys are of a different color than each other, or you've got a different religious belief. Okay, Mother Nature striking back is, and by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, COVID, part of Mother Nature. Okay, and in my opinion, and I cannot prove it obviously, because, well, frankly, I'm not in the right line of work, but in my personal opinion, it was released, not created, released by clear cutting the ancient rainforests and fracturing the Earth's surface. in order to get it oil, in order to get it lumber and what have you. Basically, we are talking about greed-based activities, okay, causing these kinds of problems. Now, COVID came out and has created absolute havoc. Okay, now as it's trying to wind itself down, and Lord knows if they're going to let it wind down now. I know when the bubonic plague hit, because I remember that one too. That was really profitable for me. Of course, in my case, I happened to be a coroner and immune at the time. So, needless to say, with people dying in those kind of speeds, I was making pretty good money. Because it wasn't the general populace that was paying us at that point, it was the government. Okay, and this is why I say, government in society is required. Overthrowing government, if you want to see how that works, read, I think it was George Orwell, but it might have been Orson Welles. I'm not quite certain which. But there's an old book, an old novel called Animal Farm. If you haven't read it, go out, get a copy, and read the thing. Okay, because it will explain what happens when you try and overthrow government without actually thinking things through. Okay. The other book, for those of you that are wearing these annoying little things, also known as glasses, there's a book out called The Bates Method to Better Eyesight Without Glasses. I put it to use and took my eyes from the point of holding my glasses right there. I couldn't physically see them. I now have 20/20 eyesight where it comes to reading. But that was because of exercises contained in that book. Okay. I didn't bother getting an operation. I didn't bother getting medication for it. Okay. I simply worked with the tools that I was given, which literally boiled down to a mindset. Okay. But read the book. You may find you're one of these people that this will work for. Now, this doesn't mean it'll work for everybody. Okay. For those of you that are clinically blind already, like if you've lost all vision, then you're pretty much hooped, okay, as far as eyesight goes, without something extreme. I am a firm believer, and I cannot prove it, I don't believe in giving people false hope, but I am a firm believer that if you've at least got light vision, you just might be able to put the techniques to use. Okay, it's possible. I don't know if it'll work. My eyesight was one step shy of being legally blind, but I still had enough I could read, albeit I had to take a book, right? And if I was reading a book, if I didn't have my glasses on, I'd have to have it this close to my face in order to be able to read it. Now I can put it over here. Well, at this point I can hold it, that far away, which isn't bad. But the point being, it is reparable. At least it was for me. And the way I look at it, everything I do, I am absolutely convinced anybody can do. Okay, now granted, I'm a bit of an extreme case in a lot of cases. Okay, but I am a firm believer that things are possible to get turned around. Okay, but it's going to require your effort, not the major media. I used to think the major media were a lot of the problem, but it turns out they aren't. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn all prove that. When the common populace got access and got the freedom to post whatever they wanted within reason. Okay, and when I talk about within reason, I'm talking about posting things that promote peace, or, don't talk about anarchy and don't promote violence and what have you. Right, but things that are saying, look, here's some information for you. When you had the option of posting, here's a nice little person walking the dog, and see how nice the dog is behaving, or posting, here's a guy beating the living stuffing out of a child. Okay, it seems to be the beating the living stuffing out of somebody is more commonly found on the net right now than the walking the dog. I mean, I saw one that was just absolutely priceless. All it was a picture of a dog. And they had the little dog running up to, it wagged its tail so badly that it was throwing its hindquarters out of alignment. I swear, if you'd grabbed hold of the tail, it looked like the front end would have waved. Okay. But it's things like that that the world needs to see. They need to see the other one that I watched was somebody that was a little 6-year-old kid that was showing he was returning to school and he was getting an entire standing ovation from the whole school because this little 6-year-old had beaten leukemia. Okay, now, and leukemia is a pain in the neck at the best of times. But this kid had all this support, and the thing that caught my attention was that everybody of every color and all genders were standing there, every age bracket that were there, were clapping for the kid. They were all celebrating the same thing. They were all happy this kid had beaten the fight. Okay. And it's that sort of thing we have to start posting a lot more of. Okay. If you're going to a church, a temple, a coven, doesn't matter what, and they're talking about fear this, fear that, this is the only answer. Okay, there was a saying back in Rome, all roads lead to Rome. Well, it was a little overstated, but the idea was right. Okay, and what I mean by that is there are a whole lot of ways of making things better on this planet that don't require somebody else saying you're doing it the right way. It requires you looking here and going, Am I proud of what I've done? Can I stand up and tell the people I run into, I did this? Okay. If you can stand up and proudly tell the majority of people, this is what I did, and not run into legal ramifications because of it, it's probably a good thing to celebrate. Now, I recommend you don't tell people, if you're trying to pass on, to put together a surprise party, don't tell the recipient. This is a surprise that would be really beneficial. And quite frankly, growing up knowing what was under the Christmas tree was kind of disappointing in a lot of ways. I lost a lot of that surprise fun thing. Okay, now, this said, I am going to bring this to a close. Okay, but give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, so you can get a look at all the videos that are coming out, because there's a lot more out there, and we're just trying to find them all. Not to mention post them. But I will be back again tomorrow. Okay, at some point. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, that sounded right, for pity's sakes, stay positive.